The silence in the house was a thick, heavy blanket. It had been that way for a while, ever since my son Mark, his wife Sarah, and their 2 kids had moved in with me a year ago. They'd hit a rough patch financially, and of course I opened my home to them. This house, the one my late husband David and I had built with our own hands and filled with decades of laughter, had more than enough room. At first it was a chaotic symphony of life, grandkids running down the halls, the smell of Sarah's ambitious but often burnt dinners, the low hum of Mark's work calls from the study. But slowly the music had faded, replaced by this muffling quiet, a quiet that felt less like peace and more like a void. I was upstairs, in my own bedroom, folding laundry. It was a simple, repetitive task that I found soothing. The scent of lavender fabric softener filled the air, a small comfort in a house that was starting to feel less like my own. As I placed a stack of neatly folded towels on my dresser, my eyes caught something on my pillow. It was a glossy trifold brochure, stark white against my cream-colored comforter. Beside it lay a small, folded piece of notepaper. My heart gave a little lurch. It wasn't junk mail. Someone had placed it there deliberately. My hands, wrinkled and spotted with age but still steady, reached for the note first. The handwriting was Sarah's, a neat, almost clinical cursive. The note was brutally short. Just 5 words. "It's time to go, Eleanor. Time to go." The words didn't compute at first. Go where? I was home. Then my gaze fell back to the brochure. The cover featured a smiling, silver-haired couple playing chess in a sun-drenched garden. The title, in a serene blue font, read, "Golden Meadows Senior Living, a new chapter of dignified care." My breath hitched in my throat. A nursing home, a retirement community. My daughter-in-law had left a brochure for a nursing home on my bed with a note telling me it was time to leave my own house. The paper felt cold, foreign in my hands. I unfolded it, my mind numb. Inside were pictures of sterile-looking rooms with single beds and emergency pull cords. There were activity schedules, chair yoga at 10 a.m., bingo at 2 p.m., movie night at 7 p.m. It was a schedule for waiting to die. The smiling faces in the photos felt like a mockery, actors paid to pretend this was a paradise instead of a holding pen. The words swam before my eyes. 24-hour skilled nursing, memory care unit, peace of mind for your family, peace of mind for them, not for me. A cold wave washed over me, so intense it felt like I'd been plunged into icy water. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a verdict. I was being evicted from my own life. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the brochure and note falling from my lap. I thought about the past year. I cooked, I cleaned, I babysat my grandchildren, Lily and Tom, whenever Mark and Sarah wanted a date night. I'd poured my savings into fixing the leaky roof they'd ignored. I'd rearranged my entire life to accommodate them, to give them a soft place to land, and this was my reward, a dismissal, a pink slip for being old. The silence of the house was no longer just a void, it was an accusation. It told me I was in the way. My presence was an inconvenience, my memories ghosts in their new home. They wanted to scrub the walls clean of me. I had become a problem to be managed, a piece of old furniture to be discarded. The love and support I had given them hadn't been a foundation they built upon. To them, it was just scaffolding to be kicked away once they were stable. And apparently, they now felt stable enough to kick. That feeling of being discarded is one of the worst things a person can go through. It makes you feel invisible. You know, speaking of things being removed without you noticing, a lot of people have been saying that YouTube has been unsubscribing them from their favorite channels automatically. Please take a quick second to check if you're still subscribed to this channel. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for us. Thanks for checking. Now back to the story. I sat there for what felt like hours, the sun slanting through the window, dust motes dancing in the light, each one a tiny, carefree universe, oblivious to the fact that mine had just imploded. The initial shock began to curdle into a slow, burning anger. How dare they? How dare Sarah, who I'd welcomed like a daughter, be so cruel? And Mark, my son, he had to know about this. He couldn't be this blind, this spineless. The thought of his complicity was a fresh stab of pain, deeper and more ragged than the first. I heard the front door open downstairs, followed by the familiar sounds of the kids bursting in from school, their backpacks thudding to the floor. Then Sarah's voice, sharp and tired. "Shoes off. I just vacuumed." A moment later, Mark's deeper tone, placating. The sounds of a normal family, a life I was now on the outside of. My decision was instant. I would not crumble. I would not cry in front of them. I picked up the brochure and the note, my fingers closing around them until the glossy paper crinkled. I walked out of my bedroom and down the stairs, each step deliberate and firm. They were in the kitchen. Sarah was unpacking groceries, her back to me. Mark was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. Lily and Tom were already raiding the pantry for snacks. "Mark, Sarah," I said. My voice was eerily calm, betraying none of the tempest raging inside me. They both turned. Sarah's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, a tiny tell that gave her away. She knew what I was holding. Mark, however, looked up with a placid, almost clueless expression. "Hey, Mum, everything okay?" he asked, pocketing his phone. I didn't answer him. I walked to the kitchen island and placed the brochure and the note squarely in the middle of the granite countertop, right next to a bag of organic apples. I smoothed out the wrinkles I'd made. "I found this on my bed," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the stone beneath the paper. "I believe it's yours, Sarah." Sarah had the decency to blush, but it was a fleeting, angry red, not a bashful one. She crossed her arms, a defensive posture. "Oh, you found it?" "Yes, I did," I said, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "Along with the note. It's time to go," very subtle. Mark finally looked down at the brochure. His eyes widened, and he looked from the glossy photos to me, then to his wife. A flicker of something, guilt, surprise, crossed his face before it was replaced by a carefully neutral mask. "Mum, listen," he started. "No, Mark, I'm not going to listen." "Not yet," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "First, you're going to listen. I want to understand. Is this a family decision, or did you just delegate the dirty work to your wife?" The question hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. The kids had stopped rummaging for snacks and were now watching us with wide, uncertain eyes. Sarah shot Mark a look, a silent command. He cleared his throat, straightening up. He was a good man, my son, but he had a weakness. He hated conflict. He would always take the path of least resistance, and I was beginning to realize that in his life, I had become a mountain. "We were going to talk to you about it tonight, Mum," he said, his voice taking on a gentle, patronizing tone that set my teeth on edge. "Sarah and we've been worried about you. Worried about me." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You were worried about me, so you left a death warrant on my pillow. That's not what it is, and you know it," Sarah snapped, her composure cracking. "Eleanor, be reasonable. You're 72. This house is too big for you. You rattle around in it. Remember when you slipped on the porch step last winter? What if we hadn't been here? What if you fell and couldn't get up?" "I scraped my knee, Sarah." "I didn't break a hip," I retorted. "And I lived in this house alone for 10 years after David passed away, and I managed just fine. I was managing just fine until you all needed a place to stay. And we are grateful for that, Mum. We really are," Mark said, stepping forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "But things are different now. We're getting back on our feet. I got that promotion. We're thinking of buying this place from you. It would give you a nice nest egg, and you could move somewhere easier, somewhere with professional care on hand. We just want you to be safe and comfortable." The words were so reasonable, so logical, but they were coated in a thick layer of condescension. They weren't thinking about my comfort. They were thinking about theirs. They wanted the house. They wanted the space. They wanted to turn my home into their home, and that required me to be gone. The nest egg wasn't for me to enjoy. It was the price for my disappearance. "Safe and comfortable," I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. I looked from my son's earnest, pleading face to my daughter-in-law's hard, impatient one. They were a team, a united front against the old woman who was overstaying her welcome. You know there's a difference between caring for someone and managing a problem, and right now I feel very much like a problem you are trying to solve. I picked up the brochure again, this time holding it like it was something contaminated. "This isn't care. This is a business transaction. You want my house, and you're offering me a room in a facility as payment." I turned my gaze to Mark, and for the first time my voice trembled, not with weakness, but with a deep, profound sorrow. "David and I built this house. We brought you home from the hospital to this house. Every scratch on that wooden floor tells a story. And you want to buy it? You can't afford to buy what this house is worth, Mark. Not because of the money, but because you clearly have no idea what it's made of." Without another word, I turned and walked away. I didn't go back to my room. I went to the front door, grabbed my coat and my purse, and walked out into the chilly late afternoon air. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there, in that house full of silence and strategy, for one more minute. As I walked down the driveway, the cold air hitting my face felt like a slap, but a welcome one. It was a shock to the system, a jolt that cleared away the fog of hurt and betrayal, leaving behind a single hard, crystalline thought. They had made their move. Now it was time for me to make mine. The park was my sanctuary. David and I used to walk here every evening after dinner. Now I sat on our bench, the one with the wobbly leg that the city never fixed, and watched the last rays of the autumn sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy smell of fallen leaves. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. The fury that had propelled me out of the house had subsided, leaving behind the cold, heavy sediment of grief. Mark and Sarah hadn't just insulted me, they had fundamentally misunderstood me. They saw me as a collection of risks and liabilities, a potential fall, a forgotten stovetop, a slow driver. They had stripped away my identity and replaced it with a caricature of old age. In their eyes, I was no longer Eleanor Vance, a woman who had run the finances for a successful local charity for 30 years, who could grow prize-winning roses, who had read every classic novel in the local library, and who had raised a son she thought she knew. I was just old, a category, a problem in need of a solution, and the solution came in a glossy brochure. A young couple pushed a stroller along the path in front of me, their laughter echoing in the quiet twilight. It was a painful reminder of what I felt I was losing, not just my home, but my role in my own family. I wasn't a matriarch anymore. I was a tenant on borrowed time. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was Mark. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Sarah. I silenced the phone completely. I knew what they would say. It would be a carefully worded script of concern, peppered with justifications. They would tell me I was overreacting, being emotional. They would try to soothe me with platitudes while holding firm to their plan. They wanted me out, and they would try to make me believe it was my idea. As darkness settled over the park, a new feeling began to stir beneath the grief. It was a stubborn, familiar spark, defiance. It was the same spark that had pushed me to go back to college at 40, the same spark that made me argue with City Council to get this very park a new playground set in the 90s. David used to call it my righteous indignation. He'd laugh and say, well, someone's about to get an earful from Eleanor Vance. The thought of him, of his unwavering belief in my strength, was like a steadying hand on my shoulder. What would David say if he were here? He wouldn't tell me to surrender. He'd tell me to fight, not with anger and shouting, but with intelligence and grace. Don't get mad, Ellie, he'd always say. Get smart. And that's when the seed of a plan began to form. It was small and fragile, but it was there. They saw me as helpless. I would prove them wrong. They thought I was a financial burden. I would show them my worth. They wanted to write the final chapter of my life. I would rip out their page and start writing my own. I needed an ally, someone outside the suffocating bubble of my family. My mind immediately went to Carol. Carol and I had worked together at the charity for 2 decades. She was a retired lawyer, sharp as a tack and fiercely loyal. After she retired, she'd started a small pro bono consulting firm, helping non-profits with their legal paperwork. She was the most practical, no-nonsense person I knew. I walked to a little cafe near the park, the bell above the door chiming softly as I entered. The warmth and the smell of coffee were comforting. I ordered a tea and sat at a small table in the corner before finally pulling out my phone and calling Carol. Eleanor, to what do I owe the pleasure? Her cheerful voice boomed through the phone. Carol, I need your help, I said, my voice thick with emotion, and maybe a dose of your famous pragmatism. I told her everything. The brochure, the note, the confrontation with Mark and Sarah. I didn't cry. I laid out the facts as clearly as I could, just like I was presenting a financial report. When I finished, there was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Well, Carol said finally, her voice devoid of its earlier cheer, that's not just a slap in the face, that's a declaration of war. I don't want a war, Carol, I said wearily. It's my family. Honey, they declared war when they put that brochure on your pillow, she countered. Now you have 2 choices. You can surrender and move into Golden Meadows, where you'll play bingo and eat pureed chicken until you fade away. Or you can mount a counteroffensive so brilliant and so unexpected that they won't know what hit them. Her words, harsh as they were exactly what I needed to hear. A counteroffensive? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you remind them who you are. You spent 30 years managing complex budgets and securing millions in funding. You balanced more books than the Library of Congress. Your mind is your greatest weapon, Eleanor. It's time to weaponize it. We talked for over an hour. Carol's legal mind was already turning, identifying my assets, my rights, my leverage. The house was in my name, and my name alone. David and I had paid it off 15 years ago. My pension was solid, and I had a decent nest egg saved up, the very money I'd been dipping into to help Mark's family. First things first, Carol said, her voice full of energy. Stop funding them. Not another dime for groceries, for the kids' soccer lessons, for the car payment you've been helping with. Cut them off. Cold turkey. But the kids, I started. The kids have two parents who need to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet, Carol said firmly. This isn't about punishing the children, Eleanor. It's about re-establishing boundaries with yours. Her second point was even more radical. They want the house. Fine. Let them think they might get it. But on your terms, you need to create an exit strategy for yourself that has nothing to do with Golden Meadows. You need to show them you don't need this house. You choose where you live. And that's when the idea blossomed. It was audacious, terrifying, and utterly brilliant. For years, I had unofficially helped friends my age with their taxes and retirement planning. They'd complain about their confusing pensions or the predatory fees from financial advisors, and I'd sit with them at my kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand, and help them make sense of it all. I never charged a penny. It was just something I was good at. What if, I said slowly to Carol, the idea taking shape as I spoke. I turned my hobby into a business, advanced financial planning for seniors. I could specialize in helping people navigate the exact transition that Mark and Sarah are trying to force on me. I could help them protect their assets, understand their options, and maintain their independence. Carol was silent for a beat. Then she let out a low whistle. Eleanor, that's not just a plan. That's poetry. It's perfect. You use their own weapon against them. You take the very thing they're using to marginalize you, age and finances, and you turn it into a source of power. By the time I hung up, I felt like a different woman. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a sense of purpose. I had a mission. I wasn't just fighting for my home, I was fighting for my identity. I went home. It was late, and the house was quiet again. A lamp was left on in the living room, a silent, half-hearted peace offering. I walked past the kitchen and saw a plate of food on the counter, covered in plastic wrap. My dinner. I ignored it. I went straight to the small office David used to use, a room that had become a dusty storage space for old photo albums and holiday decorations. I flipped on the light. The room was small, cluttered and neglected, but it had a sturdy desk, good lighting, and a window that looked out over my rose garden. It was perfect. I spent the next 2 hours clearing it out. I dusted off the old desktop computer, which was ancient but functional. I unearthed boxes of my old files from the charity, records of budgets I'd balanced and grants I'd secured. These were my trophies, my credentials. I sat down at the dusty desk and booted up the computer. It whirred to life, a loyal old soldier reporting for duty. I opened a blank document. At the top of the page, I typed Vance Senior Solutions, a plan, a business, a future. The next morning, I came downstairs early. Mark was in the kitchen, looking haggard. He'd clearly had a sleepless night. "Mum," he began, his voice soft. "I am so sorry about yesterday. The way that happened was wrong. Sarah was out of line. Were the sentiments out of line, Mark, or just the delivery?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee, my hand not shaking in the slightest. He faltered. We want what's best for you. I know you do," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "And I've been doing a lot of thinking. You're right. This house is a lot for one person. It's time for me to start thinking about my next chapter." A wave of relief washed over his face, so palpable it was almost sickening. He thought I was surrendering. He thought he'd won. "I'm glad to hear you say that, Mum," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "We can go and visit Golden Meadows this weekend. I hear their Sunday brunch is fantastic." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Oh, I won't be going to Golden Meadows," I said calmly. "I've decided to start my own business. I'll need the office for my work, of course, and I'll be converting the guest bedroom into a client meeting space, so you'll all have to be a bit more careful with noise during the day." I paused, letting the information sink in. "And about the house, I've decided not to sell, not yet anyway, but I will be drawing up a formal lease agreement for you and Sarah. Rent will be due on the 1st of the month. I think it's time we all started standing on our own 2 feet, don't you?" The smile vanished from Mark's face. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a fish that had just been unceremoniously hauled out of the water. He had expected a white flag. Instead, I had just launched my first cannonball. The battle for my independence had begun. The weeks that followed were a cold war fought in the quiet corridors of my own home. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Sarah's reaction to my announcement was exactly what I'd expected. She saw my new venture not as a genuine pursuit, but as a pathetic act of rebellion, a temporary tantrum she just had to wait out. She'd walk past my office door, which I now kept closed, with a little smirk, as if to say, "Enjoy playing businesswoman in there, Eleanor. The real world will bring you back to us soon enough." She made a point of making loud phone calls or letting the kids be extra noisy right outside my door, a petty but constant assertion of her dominance in the house. Mark, on the other hand, was a mess of confusion and guilt. He'd hover at the doorway, offering to bring me tea, or asking if my old computer was working okay. He was trying to be supportive, but his support was tainted by the condescending belief that this was all just a phase. He couldn't wrap his head around the sudden shift. His compliant, accommodating mother had been replaced by a focused, determined woman who was now presenting him with spreadsheets detailing household expenses and a fair market rental price for their part of the house. The first rent check was a major turning point. I had Carol draft a simple but legally sound month-to-month lease. When I presented it to them, Sarah scoffed. "You're seriously going to charge your own son rent?" "I'm not charging him rent, Sarah," I replied calmly, not taking the bait. "I am charging you both, as adults, for your living expenses. I have a new business to fund, and I'm no longer able to subsidize your lives. It's a matter of finance, not family." The logic was unassailable, and it infuriated her. Mark looked miserable, but wrote the check. The act of him handing it to me was a seismic shift in our dynamic. For the first time in a year, I wasn't the dependent, the charity case in my own home. I was the landlord. My business, Vance Senior Solutions, started slowly. I used a small portion of my savings to get a professional website designed and print some business cards. Carol, true to her word, was my rock. She referred me to two of her former clients, both recent widows who were overwhelmed by their late husband's financial paperwork. My first client meeting was in the newly converted guest room. I had replaced the frilly bedspread with a small, elegant conference table and two comfortable chairs. I bought a new coffee maker and a set of professional-looking mugs. When Mrs. Gable, a timid woman with frightened eyes, sat across from me, clutching a shoebox full of unsorted bills and statements, I felt a surge of purpose. For 3 hours we went through every paper. I explained what each document meant, created a simple budget for her, and helped her make a list of calls she needed to make. By the time she left, the fear in her eyes had been replaced by a flicker of control. She paid me for my time, and holding that check, money I had earned myself, through my own expertise, was more satisfying than any rent check from Mark. Word of mouth is a powerful thing in a community of retirees. Mrs. Gable told her bridge club about the woman who had sorted out her life. My phone started ringing. I helped a man named Mr. Henderson realize the financial advisor his nephew had hired was charging him exorbitant fees for underperforming funds. We found him a reputable, low-fee index fund, saving him thousands a year. I helped a couple navigate the labyrinthine application for long-term care insurance, ensuring they understood every clause before they signed. I wasn't just balancing books, I was restoring dignity. I was giving my peers the tools to fight back against the quiet, creeping assumption that once you reach a certain age, you are no longer capable of managing your own affairs. Every client I helped was a small victory against the very mindset that had led Sarah to leave that brochure on my bed. Mark and Sarah watched all of this with a mixture of disbelief and growing resentment. The trickle of clients coming to the house became a steady stream. My hobby was starting to look suspiciously like a real business. My days were full. I was up early, not to make them breakfast, but to prepare for my first appointment. I'd be in my office until evening, the rhythmic tapping of my keyboard replacing the silent resentment that used to fill my days. It's amazing how a little bit of purpose can completely change your life, isn't it? If you're finding some inspiration or value in this story, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to like the video and maybe leave a comment. It really helps the story reach more people who might need to hear it. The real flashpoint came about 2 months in. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished a very productive meeting with a new client and was walking her to the door. As we stepped into the hallway, Sarah came storming in the front door, looking furious. She had Lily by the hand, who was crying. "The school just called," Sarah said, her voice trembling with rage, not even acknowledging my client. "Lily has a fever. I had to leave a major presentation at work to go get her because someone," she shot a venomous look at me, was too busy with her little friends to answer her phone. I checked my phone. I had missed 2 calls from her. I'd been in a meeting, with my phone on silent, as any professional would. "Sarah, we can discuss this later," I said in a low, firm voice, nodding toward my client, who was looking deeply uncomfortable. "No, we'll discuss it now," she said, her voice rising. "This is exactly what we were worried about, Eleanor. You're not just a businesswoman, you're a grandmother. Your priorities are all mixed up. What if it had been an emergency? You're supposed to be our backup." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Backup, that's all I was to her. A free on-call babysitting service. My client, a woman I had just helped secure her own independence, slipped past the confrontation with a quiet "Thank you, Eleanor," and scurried out the door. I closed it behind her, my heart pounding with anger. "My priority," I said, turning back to face Sarah, my voice dangerously quiet, "is to live my life, not to be your permanent, unpaid assistant. I love Lily, and if it were a true emergency, of course I would have been there. But you seem to believe that my time has no value. You expect me to be constantly available, waiting by the phone just in case your life becomes inconvenient. It's called being a family, Eleanor, helping each other out." "No, it's called taking advantage," I countered, my voice rising to match hers. "You want my help, but you have no respect for me. You want me to be a doting grandmother 1 minute and an invisible old woman the next. You want me out of the house, but you still want me on call. You can't have it both ways, Sarah." Mark came running down the stairs, drawn by the shouting. "What's going on, Sarah?" "Mum, your mother let Lily sit in the nurse's office for an hour because she was with a client," Sarah cried, turning to him for support. Mark looked at me, his face a canvas of conflict. He saw his furious wife and his sick daughter, and his instinct was to smooth things over, to find the path of least resistance. "Mum, she's right," he said gently. "Maybe you should keep your phone on. Family has to come first." It was the final betrayal. He had sided with her. He had validated her view of me as a utility, not a person. In that moment, something inside me hardened for good. My fight for independence had just become a fight for my own sovereignty within that house. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, and saw a stranger who was willing to sacrifice his mother's dignity for a quiet life. "Fine," I said, my voice ice cold. "You want to talk about priorities? Let's talk about them." I walked past them, into my office, and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it with a quiet, definite click that echoed the closing of a door in my heart. They had no idea what was coming. They thought this was about a missed phone call. They didn't realize I was no longer playing defense. I was planning my endgame. The 2 weeks after the fight were the quietest of all. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, filled with resentment. Sarah treated me with icy disdain, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary. Mark looked perpetually guilty, avoiding my gaze and shuffling around the house like a ghost. They were waiting for me to break, to apologize, to go back to being the compliant, useful Eleanor they needed. They had miscalculated badly. Their hostility didn't weaken me, it fueled me. I poured all my energy into my work. My client list grew. I was no longer just making ends meet. I was thriving. I opened a separate business account and watched with pride as it grew. Carol and I had been working on a new strategy. "The lease was step 1, she'd said over the phone. "It established you as the owner of the property. Step 2 is to establish your independence from the property. You need to show them you have options, better options." My end game wasn't about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming my life so completely that their opinions became irrelevant. I started researching, not nursing homes, but vibrant 55-plus communities in warmer climates, small condos in the city near the theatre district, even rental apartments in a different state, closer to my sister. I printed out brochures for these places, beautiful, modern apartments with balconies and swimming pools, places that screamed freedom, not finality. I left them on the coffee table in the living room, a silent, pointed rebuttal to the Golden Meadows brochure that had started it all. I saw Sarah pick one up for a community in Arizona. She studied it, her brow furrowed in confusion. This wasn't part of her plan. Old ladies who were supposed to be shuffled off to local care didn't casually consider moving to a sunny resort community. The final confrontation came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I had just returned from a meeting with my accountant, who had been delighted with the performance of my fledgling business. I walked in to find Mark and Sarah sitting at the dining room table, a serious, united front. This felt like an intervention. "Mum, "We need to talk," Mark said, his voice grave. I took off my coat and sat down opposite them. "I'm listening." This isn't working," Sarah began, gesturing vaguely around the house. "This tension, the business, the clients, this isn't a home anymore. It's a workplace. It's not fair to the kids. And the rent," Mark added, looking pained. "Mum, it's a strain. We're trying to save up to move forward. Your plan of charging us rent is holding us back." I listened patiently, my hands folded calmly on the table. They were laying out all their grievances, all the ways my independence was inconveniencing them. "We've been talking," Sarah continued, taking the lead, "and we think the original idea was the right one. It's time. We found a place even nicer than Golden Meadows. It has an indoor pool. We've already put down a deposit to hold a room for you." She slid a new, even glossier brochure across the table. They had gone behind my back and put a deposit on a room for me. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. They hadn't listened to a word I'd said or seen any of the progress I'd made. They were still trying to solve the problem of me. I looked at the brochure, then at their earnest, expectant faces. I almost laughed. They were so convinced of their own righteousness. I pushed their brochure back across the table. "Take your deposit back," I said calmly. "I won't be needing it." "Mum, be serious," Mark pleaded. "Don't be stubborn." "I'm not being stubborn, Mark. I'm being strategic," I said. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. From it, I produced 2 documents. I slid one toward them. "This is a formal, notarized eviction notice. As per our month-to-month lease, I am giving you 30 days to vacate the premises." Their jaws dropped. Sarah stared at the paper as if it were written in a foreign language. Mark went pale. "Eviction? You're kicking us out? Your own family? I am reclaiming my home," I said, my voice steady. "But don't worry, I haven't left you in the lurch. I've found a solution for you." I slid the second document across the table. It was a rental application for a 3-bedroom townhouse in a decent, affordable neighborhood about 20 minutes away. I spoke to the landlord. "With my business income, I qualify as your co-signer. I will even pay the security deposit and first month's rent as a final gift. After that, you are on your own." Sarah was sputtering. You can't do this." "I can, and I am," I said. "For a year you have treated my home as your own, and me as a piece of inconvenient furniture. You decided my life was over, that my only value was in providing you with a house and free childcare. You tried to dispose of me when I became an inconvenience. You never once asked me what I wanted. You only told me what you had decided for me." I leaned forward, my gaze locking with Mark's. "What's not fair is teaching them that it's okay to treat their grandmother with such profound disrespect. What's not fair is showing them that love is conditional and that family members can be discarded when they become a burden." I stood up, the finality of the moment settling over me. "I am not the woman you thought I was. I am not helpless. I am not a burden, and I am not finished. My business is successful. I have my own life, my own friends, my own future, and I will live it here, in my own home, on my own terms." I paused at the doorway, looking back at their stunned faces. "The 30 days starts now. I suggest you start packing." The aftermath was messy. The 30 days were a blur of angry whispers, slammed doors, and frantic packing. Sarah didn't speak another word to me. Mark tried, a few times, to apologize, to understand. "I never meant to hurt you, Mum," he said one evening, his eyes filled with a sad, belated comprehension. "I know you didn't mean to, Mark," I told him, not unkindly, "but you did, and now we all have to live with the consequences of your choices." The day they moved out, the silence that returned to the house was different. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of before. It was a light, clean, peaceful silence. It was the sound of my own life, waiting for me. I didn't sell the house. I kept my business, Vance Senior Solutions, running from the office. It became my passion. I didn't just help seniors with their finances. I helped them write their own declarations of independence. Mark and Sarah are making it on their own. Our relationship is strained, formal. We see each other on holidays. There's a distance that may never be bridged. I see my grandchildren, but I am no longer the default babysitter. I am Grandma Eleanor, who has a busy schedule you need to book in advance. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in my quiet living room and look at the empty space where their clutter used to be. There is a pang of sadness for the family I thought I had, but it's quickly replaced by a profound sense of peace. They thought they were writing my last chapter. They didn't realize they were just giving me the push I needed to start a whole new book, and this one I'm writing myself, every single word. Thank you so much for sticking with Eleanor's story until the end. If her journey resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. See you in the next story.